Hello everyone and welcome back to the Find Your Peak podcast. As always, I am your coach and host, Megan Borensky, and today we're going to take a deep dive into why your recovery matters more than you think. We all love a tough workout. The sweat, the pump, the grind, the endorphins that are released. But what if I told you that your progress isn't really made in the gym, but in the time after? Recovery is one of the most overlooked factors in performance, and it's something that I've definitely neglected in the past. Even when it comes to aesthetics and health and long-term results, recovery is definitely a big piece of the puzzle. When I was playing golf professionally, I remember pushing my body to absolute limits and my mind where I just saw diminishing returns. I was pushing myself in the gym, 5 a.m. in the morning, and then I was going to practice all day, doing this day in, day out, and I absolutely burnt out. At the end of my professional career, I didn't even want to look at golf, I didn't want to watch it. I was just totally burnt out from it. And that's highly because I didn't give myself time to recover. And that's physically and mentally. So we're going to take a deep dive into how you can recover that's going to complement the hard work that you're putting in the gym. So what actually is recovery? What does it mean? Recovery is not just rest, it's adaptation. So allowing your body to go through changes after you've placed a stimulus on it. Now there is a difference between rest and recovery. Rest is the time away from training. So taking a break. Recovery is what you actively do to help your body bounce back. The phrase or the term active recovery is thrown around a lot in the fitness world, and it definitely has its benefits. So active recovery is what you do to help your body recover from the training and the stimulus that you put on it. Rest is just time away. Now this includes physical but also physiological recovery. That includes things like muscle repair, CNS reset, such as your central nervous system, and also hormonal balance. These are all really, really important. Just as well as physical rest, you also need physiological rest too. In addition to that, you also need mental and emotional recovery. Stress impacts recovery too. This is so underlooked in many of my clients and in something that I've done myself. You can train hard as much as you want. However, if you're not recovering properly and you're really, really stressed out, you're not going to see the results you want. Your body's going to hold on to that stress and that body fat as a source of insurance. So you want to make sure that you are managing your stress, and that includes physical, physiological, mental and emotional stress. So optimizing your recovery in all these areas. Some common recovery mistakes. The first thing I see, and this is something that I've done many times, is training hard every day without a plan. Many people will go in or approach their workouts and just want to suffer, put themselves through hell for an hour. And although I'm sure there are benefits to what you're doing, I hope anyway, then you neglect what's to come afterwards. And it just goes in this diminishing return cycle of I'm going to train hard, 1 or 2 days a week of just total hell, but there's no plan or thought behind it. So you're, let's say, bang for your buck on what you're getting out of your workouts is pretty low, but the stress on your body is pretty high. So that's one of the first things I see. The next thing, which is, again, very underrated when it comes to performance, is ignoring sleep or undersleeping. Everyone should be aiming for that 7 to 8 hours. And I'm sorry, I do not care who you are. No one can operate optimally on 4 to 5 hours sleep. I hear it quite a lot, I just sleep 4 or 5 hours. No human can operate optimally like that, okay? I'm sure some of you do sleep 4 to 5 hours, you do have jobs to get to, responsibilities, but make sure you are prioritizing your sleep. I do find it funny when people almost brag about it, I can operate on 4 to 5 hours sleep. In my head, I'm well, you're just totally cutting back on the effectiveness of your performance or your training or whatever it is. Even take that out of it. Health, your overall health is being diminished from the poor sleep. So make sure you are ignoring the people that can quote unquote optimally recover or function off 4 to 5 hours sleep, and make sure you're getting between that 7 to 8 hours. Even on the days if you can get 9 hours in, that is even better. Even if it's 1 day a week, I try. I'm not a great sleeper. I love my sleep, and if I get under 7 hours, I'm groggy as hell. So I do try to get that 8 hours sleep one day a week, or especially on the weekends, I do try sleep in. Even if I can't sleep, usually I wake up, my body clock, 5 a.m, I'm kind of wide awake. I just give myself time to rest. That's either I make a cup of coffee and go back to bed, read a book, but just chill out for another hour just to be in bed for that extra hour so I can get 9 hours in bed. Okay, so moving on to the next one, under eating. Especially if you're in a strength gaining phase, obviously you should be in a surplus. And if you were in a fat loss phase, you're obviously in a deficit. However, you don't want to be in too much of a deficit. If you're in a deficit for too long and you're under eating for too long, this feeds into your recovery. One of the things that happens when you are in a deficit for a long time is you start waking up. Your quality of sleep is suppressed. And that is because our bodies are in survival mode. So it's almost like it wants to stay alert for longer. If you're not in that state, if you're not in a fat loss or muscle gaining phase and you're just kind of going about your day not really paying attention to your nutrition, you may be under eating overall. And under eating in proteins and carbs. So I've mentioned this before, tracking is a great tool to assess where you're at. You don't need to do it for life, but even using it as a check-in process, seeing where your numbers are at. So looking at your carbs and protein intake. If you're under eating overall, then that can definitely mess with your sleep. The next one, and this is something I've done, is thinking that a rest day is just a day to sit on your backside. And again, this is something that I used to do, not often, but I used to just kind of tell myself like, oh, I can't wait for this rest day. And it would happen, more of the times in the winter when the weather was crap. But I would tell myself, yeah, I'm having a rest day this Sunday, and I would literally not move the entire day. And that is just an excuse to being lazy. And I actually had this conversation with a client the other day. We were talking about deloads, and she's very, very, very disciplined, very diligent, and getting her to rest and is actually quite difficult. So we spoke about deloads, and I said to her, it's the same thing we usually do, same routine, you just tone back on the volume quite a lot. You keep your macros the same, maybe even increase them a little bit because you might find yourself as hungry. But taking a rest day is quite difficult for her, so we're approaching it from a deload standpoint. However, I reassured her if she does want to take a rest day, that doesn't mean just sitting on her butt the entire day. Things like walking is great. I'm a huge advocate for walking, and going on a long walk on a rest day is really, really, really good. So, like I said, taking a rest day is not an excuse for just sitting on your butt watching TV all day. Okay, there's got to be a plan in place. Our bodies are meant to move, so that's why walking is really, really important, or really a good tool. It's low impact. But yeah, do not view rest days as just an excuse to being lazy. The last one, and this is one of my favourites, although I feel like I've said all of these are my favourites, but this is a really good one, is over-reliance on supplements or some sort of gadgets instead of the fundamentals. There is so much stuff on the market these days, so many supplements, so many little things you can buy that, these fat burners or fat boosters, whatever it is, and including supplements. I've heard of these like protein pills now that are on the market, and I'm sure they've got, studies behind them. I'm sure there's some sort of benefit. However, if you are someone that's going down the route of looking into supplements or these gadgets, make sure they're hitting the fundamentals first. If you're not strength training, and if you're not hitting your protein targets, and if you're not just getting a whole healthy diet, 8% whole healthy foods, then these things are just so far down the line that you don't even want to consider them. They also, going back to the bang for your buck, you're probably going to get very, very minimal bang for your buck with these things. Okay, they're gimmicks. They're total gimmicks. I'm sure, like I said, they've got very, very minimal benefits, some more than others. However, the majority of your benefits are going to come from training hard, active recovery, eating correctly, sleeping, and drinking water. That's your top 5 things that I would say is going to get you results. Ignoring these, I've seen these things that you can stick onto your abs and they vibrate and they're going to get you a 6-pack. Now that is total gimmicky, do not fall for that. So make sure you're hitting the main points first. Then if you do have questions about supplements or these gadgets or gimmicks, feel free to reach out and I can clarify them for you, but definitely don't spend your money on all these things. Make sure you're hitting the fundamentals first. I like to tell people, And I can use golf analogies for anything, I think, but I like to tell people, if I'm training someone to be, or if I'm teaching someone to be a golfer, and they're a total beginner, I'm not going to talk to them about smash factor and swing path and angle of attack. No, I'm going to get them gripping the club correctly first, getting their stance in place, getting their posture, getting their ball position, is getting the fundamentals first before you dive down into all these advanced things. And what I see typically is these things aren't even advanced for most people. They're total gimmicks. So anyway, I'll stop rambling on about that, but make sure you do not fall for marketing and investing or wasting a ton of time and money into these gimmicks. Okay, so moving on to the pillars of recovery. Like I've said, the first one you're going to focus on, and the number one recovery tool, is sleep. So making sure you are getting 7 to 9 hours consistently. It doesn't need to be perfect, but getting a good sleep routine where you can get at least 7 hours. Hopefully you're getting more towards that 8, and if you can, get that 9 if you need it. Some little tips to optimize your sleep is make sure you're sleeping in a dark room. You have a good bedtime routine, so you're falling asleep and waking at roughly the same times. Try avoid screens before bed. Okay, so putting your phone away an hour before bed, and also having a nice temperature set in your bedroom. The next thing is nutrition. So make sure that you're fueling your body to support the repair. No shock, protein is going to be your best friend, so making sure you're prioritizing protein, carbs for your glycogen, and then fats for your hormones. I've said this before, but protein is so underrated when it comes to performance, and it's underconsumed. Okay, it's very easy to get carbs and fats in our diet. They're readily available. Proteins are a little bit harder, so make sure you're prioritizing your protein. Fats, they get demonized. I'm going to say this very briefly. They are essential. Our bodies cannot produce it, so make sure you're getting them in your diet, and make sure you're consuming a sufficient amount of carbs to support recovery, to support your health, and to support your performance. When it comes to timing, now this is getting to the nuances. Make sure you are hitting your numbers first, then you can kind of look into timing. I suggest having more carbs around your workout, so that's before your workout, about an hour and a half to 2 to 3 hours before, and even post-workout meal. So having some good healthy carbohydrates. When I say good healthy carbohydrates, I'm meaning things like fruit, veggies, and whole grains. Try avoid your processed foods such as cakes and high sugar beverages, things that are processed, okay? And making sure that you're eating enough to support your workouts and to support your recovery. Like I said, if you're on a fat loss phase, you should be in a small calorie deficit. If you go in too big a deficit, then you start feeding into performance and recovery. So making sure that you have your numbers in place and you're not feeling too fatigued throughout the day, you're not feeling too fatigued through your workout, and your sleep isn't too disrupted. The next one, and this is an easy one, this is a free one, it is hydration. Drink water. It is amazing how many people I see that underconsume water, or they say they don't like water. And that does kind of make me laugh, because our bodies are 80% water or something like that. So make sure you're consuming enough water, especially when you wake up in the morning. You've not drank for hopefully 7 to 8, 9 hours. So make sure you're hydrating first thing in the morning. This is a small but extremely powerful tool. Dehydration slows muscle repair, okay, along with many other side effects. So make sure that you are staying hydrated. When it comes to electrolytes, make sure you find balance, and you can get your balanced electrolytes through things like water. And if you need to have an electrolyte supplement, then you can add that. Just watch out for the sugar content, especially if you're living in hot climates or if you're a heavy sweater. Having an electrolyte drink isn't a bad idea, but make sure that you are checking that the sugar content in that, because some of these products do have high sugar content. Moving on to active recovery. So what active recovery is low intensity movement. I've already said this before. Walking is so incredible, so powerful. If you're not a huge fan of walking, or if you want to do something more indoors, you can do mobility, or something like yoga is really good, or Pilates. I know Pilates are getting very, very popular. My mum started going to them and she's really, really enjoying it. Something that I might start doing a little bit, just especially as we approach the winter season, and I don't really want to walk in the cold and the rain, so. But adding in low impact recovery. This will help with increasing your circulation and recovery without adding any fatigue. So you shouldn't really feel like if you do 10, 20 minutes of Pilates that you feel like you need to have a sit down and you need to recover from that. Okay, you should feel refreshed from these exercises. The last thing we're going to discuss is stress management. So you may have heard this before, but when we are stressed, our bodies release cortisol. And what cortisol does is it puts a total stopper on any form of gains. So if you're pushing yourself in the gym and you are highly stressed, your body's going to prioritize managing that stress rather than building that muscle. Especially if it goes unmanaged, it can lead to whole other aspects of things. So making sure that you are managing your stress accordingly. This can be done through recovery. Like I said at the start, both physical and psychological recovery is really, really important. I've definitely neglected the psychological part and the physical part in my past, and I can absolutely tell you that it just totally stalls your progress. Okay, you will not progress if you are stressed out. Some ways to ease psychological stress. One of the things is meditation. This is actually something that I started doing just over a year ago, and I know it sounds a little kind of out there. I was very skeptical on it, and I started doing it, 10, 20 minutes every other day. And what I first found was that I actually fell asleep doing it, which shows how tired I was. But I found it just totally grounded me. And I almost felt like how tense my body was. And especially like in my forehead. I remember listening to a video, and the guy I was listening to on YouTube was saying to relax your forehead. And it was amazing. I did not realize how much stress I hold in my forehead. And holding it in your shoulders is very common as well. It's absolutely where I hold it. So make sure you're keeping your shoulders down, recognizing when you are tensing up and just relaxing as best you can. Meditation is really good. It can go through a full body relaxation for you, which can help your muscles just relax, and also your mind. The next thing is journaling. And again, I know this sounds a little out there, but give it a try. Again, this is something I do quite a lot. If I feel like writing things down will help me rather than just speaking to someone, although speaking to someone does help. Sometimes I just need to verbalize things to my husband or a friend, or sometimes just my mum. Just once I say it out loud to get it out there, it's like, whew, okay, now it's off my shoulders. One of my good friends told me this, and this was a really good tip that I apply to a lot of things when it kind of weighs on me, is once you say it out loud, you realise that this thing no longer has power over you. It's almost like you say it and you're like, it's actually not that big a deal. Or it's like, why am I stressing about this? And you also get some good advice. If something is weighing on you and you speak to someone, they see it from outside of perspective, maybe they're not emotionally attached to it. And they can be like, well, why don't you just do that? And you're like, And you also realise, like I said, it takes the power away from you, or it has over you, sorry. So, and this can be minor things add up. Or it can be something big. Once you say it, it's kind of like whoosh. And it also allows you to kind of tackle the problem with a support system. So speaking to someone, journaling is, like I said, really good. It allows you to get all your jumbled thoughts down on paper, kind of clarifies things, even just writing down like, I feel stressed because of this. It's like, And even if you say that out loud, it's like, okay, it's actually not a big deal. So journaling is really, really powerful. The next thing is having downtime. Okay. Now downtime can look like different things for different people. It can be reading a book, it can be sitting outside listening to music, sunbathing, it can be watching a show with your spouse, it can be going for that walk, it can be phoning a friend, but totally relaxing. It can even be, not that I'm encouraging people to do this, sorry, I think you can hear some birds chirping in the back, it is 6:30 a.m. in the morning right now, so the birds are chirping, but doing things that take you away from your typical routine, like even going and grabbing a drink with your friends on a Friday night, or even online shopping, within reason. Sometimes it's something, if I've wanted something for a long time and I've not really invested in myself for a while, I will treat myself to, a new pair of shoes or whatever it is. So, but giving yourself that downtime where you can totally relax and you're kind of detached from, work, kids, training, whatever's kind of on your mind, is really, really helpful. One of the things that I love to do is go get coffee, and sometimes I even do work while I do it, if it's nothing too stressful, but I'll go grab coffee, sit in a coffee shop and, kind of people watch as I'm kind of doing whatever task I've got on hand. I find that really, really relaxing. The last little bit I want to move on to is, how do you know you're recovering well? So what are the key indicators? The first one is that your strength is trending up, so you're performing better in the gym. If you notice that you've plateaued, it may be your recovery. So you should see strength gains enhanced. The next thing is good sleep and mood. So you should be sleeping good and you'll actually know your mood is regulated. If my husband has listened to this, he knows firsthand that if I sleep bad, I am very, very moody. That's a nice way of putting it. So apologies, but yes, I am very moody if I do not get my sleep. You'll also notice consistency in your energy. So your energy is stabilized throughout the day. Your motivation to train, so that kind of excitement to go to the gym is still there. If you notice that you're kind of dragging your feet and you're almost dreading it, then you may be underslept and your hormones might be out of whack. You may be under eating and you may be not recovering well. Okay, so motivation should be relatively high. Of course, you're going to have days where you don't really feel like it, but if you notice that you're almost dreading it, then maybe look at your recovery. The last thing is reduced soreness. So if you notice that you are constantly sore from training, then it's probably your recovery. That's a huge indicator. It's a huge physical indicator of under-recovering and under-eating and under-sleeping, okay? And this kind of feeds into the last little thing I want to talk about, and that is some red flags of under-recovery. The first thing being constant fatigue. So if you constantly feel tired, or even if you're kind of high energy for the first thing of the day, and that's when you go work out, but then you're like absolutely gassed the rest of the day, then you're probably under-recovered. The next thing is a plateau or regression. So you're actually regressing in the gym. You're regressing in your performance. Poor sleep and irritability. So like I said, kind of the opposite of what I've just mentioned, having good sleep and mood. The opposite is having poor sleep. And if you're irritable, like I said, this is definitely a side effect if I'm underslept. So yeah, just avoid me if I'm undersleeping. And the last thing is actually a decrease in focus. Again, this is something that I suffer with. If I have been underslept and not performing or under-recovering, I get brain fog. I get major brain fog, and I'll literally be in the middle of a sentence and I kind of just like zone out. I'm like, I don't even know what I'm talking about. Or someone's talking to me and I kind of just zone out. I know like everyone does this here and there, but brain fog, it's totally like things just fly out your brain. And this can be a sign of stress, under-recovery, poor sleep. It can be multiple things. Just a side note off that, one of the main causes of brain fog is actually under-consuming carbohydrates. Again, this is something that I recall when I was dieting for like years. I was under-consuming carbs and I noticed I'd get brain fog a lot. And I was actually trying to play golf professionally at the time. I think I was just coming out of college and transitioning into professional golf. And I noticed my ability to concentrate was just crap. And it was because I wasn't consuming enough carbs, especially as an athlete. You need to make sure you're eating enough carbs to fuel your body, but also fuel your brain, okay? So if you notice that you're getting brain fog quite a lot, maybe look at your carb intake as well. So before I wrap up the episode, I'm just going to rattle through some practical tips / action steps that you can take, you can apply right now. The first thing being plan 1 to 2 full rest days per week, depending on what your performance or your training looks like. If you need to take 2, then absolutely take 2. If 1 is sufficient enough, then 1 is perfectly fine. Make sure you're prioritizing your sleep and nutrition over supplements, so getting into a good sleep routine and nourishing your body with good, whole, healthy foods. The next thing is schedule deloads. So if you are training week in, week out at the same intensity, maybe it's time to have a deload. I'm a huge fan of planning my deloads around the time I'm going on vacation. So we were in Vegas earlier this year and I had a deload that week and it was perfect. It takes the stress off me. I can enjoy my time in Vegas, but I can also get into the gym and just keep my body moving, keep it progressing. The next thing is track biofeedback. So that's your energy, your sleep, and your stress. There's many ways you can do this. Something I do with my clients is get them to manage this and rank it on a scale. The last thing is treat recovery as part of your training. It's not an afterthought. So this is part of the puzzle. So if your goal is weight loss or if you have some physique goals, it's not just your training, it's your nutrition, it's your recovery as well. I heard this in another podcast, but you almost want to treat it like a 3-legged stool. So you've got training on one part, nutrition on another part, and then recovery on the other leg. If you take away one of those legs, you're kind of wobbling on the 2 legs. If you take out 2, then you're just going to totally crash. Okay, so you want to make sure that the 3-legged stool is nice and sturdy and you're not neglecting any of those legs. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up there. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, make sure you like it, follow, subscribe, depending on what platform you're listening on. Make sure you share it with a friend. The more people we can get into this space, the more people we are helping. So make sure you're sharing it. If you're interested in coaching, then link in the show notes will lead you to an application form. You can reach out to me on Instagram, and you can also join our Facebook group. There's tons of content out there, so make sure you're following along. Reach out if you have any questions. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you guys next week.